Greetings from Vilnius. I'm your host, Valentina Kuzik, and today we have an honor of welcoming to our podcast Lithuanian former Foreign Minister, Gabrielius Landsbergis. He'll join us online. If you're wondering why we are not meeting in person and just how bad my Lithuanian really is, stay tuned. Sveikiname iš Vilnius, minister Landsbergis.
Labai malonu.
Labai malonu. Ačiū labai, kad prisijungėte.
Labai ačiū Jums už galimybę. Kaip laikotės?
So I'm greeting you from Vilnius, Lithuania, and Vilnius became my second home. Since March 2025, me and my kids relocated to Lithuania, and we are very grateful to Lithuanians and you personally for supporting Ukraine. And for our international audience, just to give a perspective, every bus in Vilnius carries a sign, Vilnius loves Ukraine, and probably there are more Ukrainian flags than Lithuanians. Sometimes it seems so in Vilnius. We are very grateful for your support and for standing with us, and thanks for joining us from where are you joining us? So maybe you can expand on where are you now and what are you doing there?
So I'm joining you from United States, from California, Stanford University, where I started my tenure as a visiting fellow. I'll be working mostly on the things that I've been always working on, is how to make not Lithuania great again, but how to make our region stronger, more resilient, how to tell our story, to participate in the conversations that are taking place here. It feels far away from everything, but there are a lot of people who are interested and do care about the Baltics, about Ukraine, about all the changes. So I'm glad I have this opportunity.
So geography often shapes perspectives, and I know you just relocated to US, but how do you maybe assess what is happening in US currently and how it changed since you were in Lithuania and were looking at the situation from Lithuania?
Well, it's interesting to say that, European focus on the US politics is a recent phenomenon, meaning that, what is happening now, the policy changes, so to say, or the words, the policies that come out of the White House or the administration are pretty much at the focus of European countries. My perspective is that it didn't start now. That United States have started to shift from Europe much earlier, but unfortunately we were not inclined to listen to that. President Obama, more than a decade ago, announced that that United States will be pivoting to Asia, and pretty much it's very much the same thing as Donald Trump is saying. But Obama was much more polite, and we thought that we can, in many cases, ignore that. So for me, it is more interesting to see, the processes that are below the day-to-day politics. What has driven United States to pivot? How can we work with United States, which is turning away from Europe? And imagine a huge ship, that started turning the wheel more than 10 years ago, and slowly, it's turning away from Europe. And now what we're seeing is, just a result. The President Trump is the result of the policies that have started long before.
But what are people around you currently telling about their assessment of the situation? There might be US citizens, but also, the people from Europe you're talking to in US. What's their perspective? Because here in Europe, we do see what is happening. Yeah, we can see the threats. We are thinking, what else can we do to kind of manage the situation on our side? But what is happening in US?
It's interesting that some of the people are just suggesting that probably they are speaking from their own personal perspective, that that we need to brace. So brace, 3.5 years, things will change. They will go back to normal. We've seen that. There was Trump one, then we had Biden. So it's kind of that. Again, I don't entirely I don't personally believe that or agree with that. I don't think that bracing is the strategy. Just kind of holding the air and trying not to
Right.
breathe, for 3 years. I don't think that it will work this way. Others are agreeing that that United States is different. Is a country that is looking for its new position in the world, trying to figure out the great power competition. That a rekindling of a Cold War 2.0, how that is going to work, and unfortunately, no clear strategy is yet seen. So United States in itself basically admits, at least part of the people admit that, okay, the things are different, but we don't know yet how it will work out.
Right. It seems like we have very much in common with Americans, though. We also don't know what to do, and we want to come up with a strategy. But it seems we sometimes it seems we are doing nothing. And I wanna, I regret not having a chance to talk to you when you were here in Vilnius. Maybe I'll have a chance in future. But before your departure, I did manage to visit one of the events where you were a speaker, and it was in a bar. It was part of the democracy talks, and it was right after Munich. It was a very interesting event, though. It was a very small space, just for our listeners to understand the context. It was right about Munich, a couple of weeks. And it is a very interesting format when you actually can see the speaker and you can see that you can feel the tension and anxiety in the air, and it's really impressive. And I felt that you were very anxious about what was happening, right after Munich. And you mentioned your kind of a personal dimension of the situation. It was your both sons serving in the Lithuanian army. So I want to ask you now, because back then you were saying that you are not sure whether Europe will be able to respond and to rearm, and to prepare. It's been around then more than half a year after Munich conference, and I want to ask you, what's your assessment of the situation now? Is Europe rearming?
Well, things are changing tiny bit. But it's a strange paradox. Just before our conversation, I've read the announcements from the German intelligence leader, director of German intelligence, where he said that Russia could attack European country basically any day. And it's not the
It's
first time.
already been attacking, though.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you're also true. You're right. But so probably, he means that, further escalation on something like that. And if I take his words, right? So, he's one of the chief policy makers in Germany, which is a major country in Europe and in NATO. And he's saying that any day from now, we might expect an escalation from Russia. And then when I see when somebody like him would say things like that, I would, turn around and then you would see people running around, doing things, new initiatives, new suggestions, new policies. And then you turn around and you basically, hear the chirping, there's just nothing really is happening, right? So we are as business as usual. We are a bit nervous when we've seen drones in Poland, a bit more nervous about the drones in Nordic countries above the airports. But in reality, I don't see that we are, moving in the pace that we believe that it's needed. So yeah, so we are in this interesting, period of time where we basically just hope that, that this
That this
director
won't
is,
happen.
yeah, that it just won't happen. That director is not right.
Yeah, but also it's happening. I was recently, like a couple of days ago, listening to some expert discussion at Deutsche Welle, and there was one of the experts. I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he said, "Well, yes, we do have drones flying over our territory, but listen, they don't carry the payload." So okay, so where is the red line? Because you're saying if you are quoting basically the German authorities saying that further escalation. So just for me to understand, what does it mean further escalation?
Well, anything, right? So I believe that that Putin will continue doing what he's doing, with increasing or pushing the red lines further, because his expectation is that there will be no price. Maybe he knows that somewhere, I mean, if he crosses a certain line, that there will be repercussions. So he doesn't want to cross that line. Maybe not yet, maybe not now. But he intends to push further as far as he can get away with. I've argued that with what happened in Poland, there was no price that Putin paid after his operation. Nothing has happened, right? So that means that for him, in his mind, it's an invitation to continue,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So imagine, okay, so next week there are, not 20, but okay, 5 drones with payloads.
But just five.
Just 5, right? And then we say, well, okay, but it's a smaller amount, right? So he could have sent 20, he didn't send 20, so now it's just 5. So it's not an escalation, maybe. Let's do analysis in NATO. Look, even after Polish incident, they NATO leadership, because that was an agreement by the countries, they announced that they're going to assess whether that was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Polls were saying the drones were, they were reworked. They had additional gas
Fuel.
tanks,
Yeah.
fuel tanks, in order to reach Poland, right?
Right.
NATO countries said we cannot be sure. We need an assessment, an official assessment. So, as far as I know, the assessment is still ongoing. We're still in the expertise mode. So, 5 drones with payloads. I'm sure that it would take 2 to 3 months to assess whether.
So where is the red line from your perspective? Boots on the ground.
Well, that's a good question. I've tried theoretically to think, what could be the Pearl Harbor of Europe, where it would be impossible to say that, okay, the reality is different now. Probably something that would be a change of a border, in one of the countries. I'm not saying that that country is completely occupied, but that there is a change in the border. That could probably then lead to understanding that, okay, now this is serious.
So now speaking about Lithuania, closer to Lithuania. So I've been living in Lithuania for a while already. I do have some of the acquaintances and friends who are Lithuanians. I am participating in a pretty great initiative preparing trench candles for Ukrainian soldiers, organized fully by Lithuanians, and mostly, all the participants are Lithuanians, basically, most of them. And also, I interviewed a lot of Lithuanians for my podcasts, and like privately, people say that Lithuanians are maybe not ready to fight. That's why they support Ukrainians so much. Like one of the reasons. At the same time, when I'm visiting like conferences, defense conferences from the stage, the Ministry of Defense of Lithuania and also other ministers, of course, of other countries say that we are building deterrence, we are ready, we'll buy everything from manufacturers that we can. At the same time, they buy larger tanks and less maybe drones, which might be effective, though everyone is saying that they become obsolete just in 2 months after they are actually produced, because there is a rapid innovation cycle on the front line. So my question to you, are Lithuanians ready to fight? And is Lithuania ready to potential attack?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I've been looking into the way that countries choose to respond to this. I was criticized in some occasions because people would say, well, I mean, if you say that we're not ready, then you're sending a message to Putin
Right.
where it's easier for him to
Uh-huh.
to calculate. So it's better then for the purposes of strategic communication to say, well, we're digging trenches, we're mining fields, and we're more ready than ever, right? So it's kind of so that might influence Putin's decisions. And okay, I gather that there is merit into thinking like that. But there's additional problem in this. If I say that we are super ready, that removes the pressure from the government to change anything that they're doing, right? So because
Yeah.
people think that everything is being done, there
Right.
are no problems. And so Putin might be scared, or he might not be scared. We don't know that, but we know that people will be, calmer. And that, the Minister of Defense, the Prime Minister, the President, everyone, the leaders of Lithuania can come out and say, well, look, even the opposition or, the people who are experts are saying that everything is fine. So it's a strange crossroad where you basically need to make a choice and decide on what you're going to tell the people. My belief was always it's better to tell the truth. Even risking to tell the truth to Putin as well. But the truth in democracies is one of the instruments that creates a mandate for change.
Kind of, but also it's really politically unpopular, probably. It's my assumption to say that we are not ready and we probably need to pay more taxes. By the way, that was a case in Lithuania recently. Yeah, I think a half a year ago, the new tax was introduced. It was additional to fund the defense. And I do remember going through Seimas, and there were lots of people at the gatherings protesting this decision of the government. So
Yes, but I mean, you need to explain then, what's at stake, right? So when we were in power, we tried to really to construct the narrative in a way that, look, we're not changing the taxes because the government is doing a poor job, or because just we just now figured out that the things are bad, but because Putin is constantly getting closer, and we don't know what he will think next. That means that we need to be prepared, and in order to be prepared, we need to be well funded. And there is no other way how to fund that, but just if we want that the funding to be sustainable, we have to all think of burden sharing. So of course it is not popular. Of course it's not popular, but I mean it's well, historically it's known to give better results to do that, right? So for example, take Lithuania's example now. You mentioned yet we're buying tanks. Well, tank is a half of a problem. But we're buying transport planes, and using, a big chunk of our defense procurement budget that would probably, otherwise we would be able to prepare, to build the so-called drone wall or whatever.
mhm.
But now we will be buying transport planes. The government has a very difficult time to explain why would they be doing that. I have a question. Now look at Ukraine and tell me how many transport planes are Ukrainians using? Well, zero. Why? Because it's very difficult. I mean, it's impossible to control the sky. Even with F-16s that Ukraine has, even with Patriot that Ukraine has, we don't have them. So unless we believe that Putin will never attack, or we will be somehow magically protected from the first second, this is why then the only argument that I would agree that we need to buy the transport planes. Otherwise, they are the target number one. They won't lift off. They will be shot down. They will be attacked by drones, and we are doing that. So I believe that it's important to tell to the people that that your money, taxpayers' money, is not being used well. Lithuania is not strengthening itself. Unfortunately, the decisions are these are mistakes. It's not a good decision.
How about the civic preparedness?
Well, that as well. I mean, Vilnius has announced that, that they are going to prepare the evacuation plans. Yesterday, there were announcements about the common evacuation plans between Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. And yeah, I understand that, right? So, my parents, would ask me the question, so how the things would be, my mom, who probably, doesn't think that she would be a fighter in any war. So she needs to know the plan about what happens if Vilnius is being shelled. But then there are a bunch of people who would ask me a question. Okay, so where do I get a gun? Which group or battalion would I belong to if I want to fight, if I want to defend my country? And you have very little information about this. Nobody's talking, okay, so that, that Lithuanians are, producing new units, of volunteers that are, training how to shoot, training how to, prepare Molotov cocktails, and, where would they be, posted? I've always argued that we need to increase the numbers of conscription. So that we would, officially conscribe not just volunteers, but basically conscribe young people, so that they would be, they would go through the training. Again, this is as until now has been an impossible decision to make.
Because it's unpopular, right?
Because it's unpopular, yeah, and that means that people, that are running the country, they still believe that this won't happen. Most likely, this won't happen. Nothing will happen.
And you think it's a mistake?
Absolutely.
Right.
I think that we there's very rarely it is a mistake to be over prepared.
Yeah, it's the same deterrence they are talking about constantly.
Exactly. Yeah. And I did my homework twice. Well, I'm yet to hear that people would say that that is a mistake.
At Militarnyi, we focus on covering military tech and equipment, and of course, much of that information is classified. I was interviewing, I was, asking for a comment of Dovilė Šakalienė, but she, of course, was very diplomatic, saying that this information is classified about the actual production, right? We don't have the actual numbers even for Ukraine, and it's totally understandable. But what's your feeling? I spent last of my 10 years in international development, and I was just visiting the largest conference on defense in Ukraine, in Lviv, of Brave One Tech Cluster. And they announced $100 million of investment in defense. And for me, it's peanuts, because I think, this is basically hardware and software production compared to the money that, you said previously put to, international development. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. So my question to you, what's your assessment of the actual production of weapons in Europe? We probably can't operate with numbers, but the feeling, some insiders' information, anything you know.
Well, I mean, as I said, previously, that the things are changing. So, so it would be unfair to say that, that we are at the same stage as we've been in 2022 or even 2024. Just take German commitment of €500 billion, right? So it's a very big commitment. That alone, one country, single country from European Union has pledged 500 billion euros to spend on defense. With that money, the factories will expand, and I'm sure that they are already expanding. My main question is, so how, imagine if that is one country doing that. So how much united Europe could do if all of us would join in that effort. Like we did, for example, with COVID, right? So where Europe created a fund of 750 billion euros, for reconstruction and assistance to businesses and digitalization and so many other things. And I mean, it proved to be quite effective, quite something, right? So now Europe, as such, has created a fund of 150 billion euros. So, if I'm not mistaken, in Europe's minds, Russia is 5 times less of a threat than COVID.
Right. That's fun. Yeah, so you do see improvements, yeah, in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, there are improvements, but I mean, it's nowhere at the level as to, what what Ukraine has, for example, 40%, 50% of countries' GDP goes to defense.
Right, but also we are able to do that because Europe is covering a lot of our social expenses, and
No,
part of
I
that.
understand that. No, I believe that the big part of that would be done either way, right? It would be the question whether you're defending your country or not. Now, when out of the big countries, I believe only Germany has a plan of how to go beyond 2%.
Right.
Poland had the plan, right? So they've been there for a while. France does not have a plan, or the government. Uh, United Kingdom is in a tough position as well financially, so I don't think that we will be seeing a lot of investment there. Um, Italy, Spain even said that they are not going to, they're at 1.6, and they believe that
Right, right.
it's, they might reach 2%. Same for Belgium. So
So we talk a little bit about hardware and software, so actual weapon production, and also a little bit about strategic communication of how we can prepare. What else? What else we can do? Both governments and ordinary citizens.
my advice to countries like mine, like Lithuania, was always imagine that the war, if we were to have it on our soil, at least for a start of it, would look like the war in Ukraine. Same instruments, same tactics, everything the same. Our belief is that our war, the war against us, would be waged according to NATO's plans. And NATO's plans foresee a war that is very different from the war in Ukraine. So it's control of the sky, complete control of air domination, um, and enormous bombardment of the enemy territory that would not allow them neither to march forward nor to operate with drones or anything like that. So that is the concept. But that requires time, and that requires political commitment. And we don't know, okay, even if we assess that there is a political commitment, the time we cannot control. That means that logistical operations, in order to support a country like Lithuania, would take a while. And the enemy would march ahead. So I would argue that we need to take in all the lessons that we can from Ukrainians. And that is changing a little bit, but extremely slowly. So slowly that it's ridiculous. And I've been arguing for that 3 years ago, when the war started, and after the battles of Kiev and Kherson and Kharkiv region, I said, okay, so fine, Ukrainians are able and capable, and they know what they're doing, right? So and these lessons are invaluable.
And when you're saying the lessons from Ukraine, what exactly do you mean?
Well, the tactics of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the iterations of technology, what is being used where and when. How would we, if we were to have the technology that Ukrainians have, how would we use that today? Is it possible uh, to use part of it to, first of all, to assist Ukrainians, well, what we have been doing, to for Ukraine to build up its defenses, but also so that we are implementing the same instruments on our soil. So take Klaipėda Sport. Is it possible to start developing defense systems that would work as a deterrent now? For Klaipėda and for maritime security, border security, deep strike capability, and all the other things. So basically, just kind of listen in, take in, and use what is possible. And we have means of cooperating with Ukrainians, right? So we've been there even before the war started. So I wouldn't feel bad in a way saying, to my Ukrainian friends that, guys, we need you, we need your help. And I'm sure that we would be heard. right? So
Yeah. Jonas Salman once said that he thinks that strong Ukraine is better security guarantee than NATO.
yeah, that's, okay, I wouldn't I wouldn't compare that. I'm saying that in parallel. I've always used this argument. Spoke yesterday to an audience in Vilnius. There was a cinema festival, and I've said, ask yourself a question: if Lithuania were to fight Russians, would you rather fight alongside Ukrainians or alone? Just a very simple question. And if you would say, well, of course, with Ukrainians, I mean, despite the fact whether, NATO, yes or no, even with NATO, yes, but would you like to have Ukrainians with you? A division of Ukrainians, drone operators, people who know how drones work, who faced Russians for 4 years and won many battles. Would you like them in Lithuania to help you? 99% of people, I believe, would say yes. So that answers the question.
Right.
So that we in our hearts we are already in military alliance. Just we don't know, we have not yet figured out the way how to practically enforce it.
Okay, so about the new military alliances, I wanted to ask you, maybe, I mean, I've heard such ideas. If some experts say that NATO might become obsolete because it's too large, because we can't rely on US anymore as we relied previously, maybe the future are smaller, more agile alliances of those countries who really understand the threat of Russia, like intermarium concept, Baltics, Ukraine. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been on the opinion that Lithuanians cannot be the ones, burying NATO, right? So um, whatever happens, right? It's out of our hands. We will not be the ones walking out. We will not be the ones weakening it. But I always suggested that for whatever reasons, and yes, one of the reasons is the changing of U.S. Attitude towards Europe. And we spoke about this, that it's not a new phenomenon. Just it's now it's very obvious that it's happening, and it's unfortunate that it's happening at probably the most dangerous time in Europe. That we need what would be called a Plan B situation, right? So even if NATO is doing well, but as we spoke, that for example, certain political decisions are not being made on time. That the countries like with Poland now, they are still discussing whether that was intentional, and stuff like that. So Article 5 conversation would not be any easier. It's very political. Countries have to go, ambassadors have to go back and forward to their respective capitals, bring back information.
Right.
And
While
I mean,
for Bucha, it's just needed 1 month.
yeah, exactly. So, Russians would spread all sorts of disinformation. I mean, it will be very hectic and very difficult to see through the fog. So in any way, I mean, it's just that the political decision might take longer than expected. You might have a very troubling situation on the ground. So for that, I've always argued that a plan B is needed, and that in turn is maybe there's a way. I'm sure that there is a way how countries that are immediately affected by any changes, geopolitical changes, would be ready to respond. You call it the first responder group. The countries that mobilize faster, that have
Coalition of the willing to.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, coalition of the willing to defend a region, let's say, and here, Lithuanian Polish connection is a very important one. We've just because of our history and so many other things, we fought together, we won together, we lost together. So kind of it's normal to assume that there without safe Lithuania there is never safe Poland. So they have an interest in helping us secure our country, because in turn they secure it themselves. So Lithuanian Ukrainian connection, we spoke about this. It definitely has not yet gone the all the way that it can go. The second element is a Nordic Baltic.
Mm-hmm.
with Finland and Sweden joining NATO. There's a real change in the regional dynamics. Kind of also, strategically, that both countries are now part of alliance and no longer neutral. So for them, to figure out the ways how can we help each other stronger. Also, it is a possibility. So this is not a very convenient question. Not many people raise it in public because kind of in people's mind, just talking about this kind of weakens NATO. Yeah, I mean, that's, like we spoke before, right? So kind of if you speak about this, then you inform Putin that blah, 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 that, that we are, maybe NATO is not there. So it's all about strategic communication. I mean, it annoys me, a lot. So, but okay, maybe not everybody can speak about this. Well, people who are outside politics, maybe they can speak and suggest that, okay, well, let's not weaken NATO. Let others do their job, or either strengthening or weakening it. We will strengthen it as much as we can, but if we can put a pillow, knowing that we might fall, it is always better.
Great. Yeah, makes sense. I wanted to ask you a question, a little bit maybe a personal one, since I spent 10 years in international development projects. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think in current geopolitical situation, how should the programs that support democracy that might be funded probably by European Union since USAID is no longer there, change in response to the current geopolitical changes?
Well, first of all, Europe needs to decide that it is in the business of defending democracies. It has not yet decided that. European budget for international development, I wouldn't know the numbers, but I can easily guess that it's, at least 10 times as large as the budget for support to democracies. Meaning that Europe is extremely active in building water purification, helping, whatever else, what other programs that there are, but never saying that we have an interest in stronger democracies. So that, that's
In
what
the
the democracy.
neighborhood, you mean, right?
Just in the neighborhood, or basically anywhere where Europe would believe that they have an interest, or we have an interest, right?
Right.
Our development aid is, I think it's the largest in the world. But now when you speak about support to democracies, I don't see many doing that, and I don't see Europe as being the main, flag bearer in this.
But do you think it's needed?
I think it's needed. I think that the whole rethinking is needed, because we are at the time where, you see, I mean, the problem is that if we compare 1990s to now, where in 1990s the young countries, young Ukraine, young Lithuania, emerging from the fallen Soviet Empire, for us democracy was a promise of stability, a promise of better life, a promise of lower corruption, so many other things that we wanted to associate our future with, ours and our children's future, right? So if you were asked in 1990s what sort of a future you want to live, of course, democratic, of course, Western, as close to American as it's possible, right? Where, everybody's free and, and then happy, and, the country is stable and prosperous. That has been a promise. Now, I mean, it's very interesting, because there is very little promise that democracies now we can offer, with the promise that we can give. Right? Europe as a democracy seems ineffective, slow, old, and I mean, okay, right, but it's more a museum rather than energetic power. At least that is the perception, right? United States, it's in a very
Well, many say that Ukraine is a new energetic democracy, while some claim we don't have elections, though.
well, I mean, Ukraine, certain elements for Ukraine, still have to be worked out. Ukraine will need to work out, how to deal with corruption and so many other things. So that's it's not going away. I mean, and that will be, a thing that people will demand from the government, and we've seen that, with the protest that took place in Kiev not so long
And that's
time ago.
actually what they call democracy, though. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely. So the problem now is that in some cases, non-democracies or authoritarian regimes kind of they make a promise for the future.
Mm-hmm.
If you seek, top class innovation, stability, you might point into one country where I say, well, take our path, and you can be well, good enough. And look, for example, what is happening in Georgia. I think that Georgia is a very interesting case. It's actually a laboratory of democracy versus autocracy. And democracy is messy. It's messy, and remember Saakashvili, right? I mean, he gave a promise, but it was so convoluted, this and that, and good things and bad things, everything, boiling in one pot. And people don't remember it kindly. Not everybody remember it kindly. And unfortunately, his legacy, is very much mired in scandal and problems and whatnot. I mean, and then you have guys who basically take over the country for their own, business interests or whatever, and they call it stability. And yes, they steal elections, clearly. I mean, that is obvious. But then there is a big part of people who support them. And they are very much, they are not afraid to say, well, we're building, Azerbaijan or, Central Asia or whatever country, right? Where government most likely never
So
changes,
basically, they are making autocracies sexy a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, exactly. And so that is the biggest change in 1990s. I mean, in 1990s, autocracy was Soviet Russia, Soviet Union, rotten to a core, corrupt like hell, lost every battle that was thrown at it. Not
Mm-hmm.
being able to offer any commodity to people. If you want to
Right.
watch a movie, it's just American. If
Right.
you want, to feel freedom, kind of, you have to drink Coca-Cola and wear jeans. That is how, and listen to rock and roll, because everything else in Russia is worse. There was no promise, and now suddenly it's a bit different. So
Huh.
that is a huge problem. We need to really work on it.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah, I've never heard about that, but I'll think about it. And the last question I wanted to ask you, I've always admired your sense of communication style and ability to tell stories. I do remember getting back to that meeting at the Democracy Talks. You told the story about Zelensky and the glass full empty and full. That was very interesting. And I wanted to ask you for another story that embodies probably the last year. Something that you remember as a case that probably gives us a hint what will happen next.
Oh, hmm. I need to think about it. Um, I think that, I won't think of a story, but I'm thinking of an example. And we touched upon about while talking about strategic communication. And before when the Second World War started, and Poland was already invaded, um, Belgium was invaded, Denmark was invaded. Big part of France was falling, and United Kingdom was retreating from the continental Europe. And starting to feel the brunt of German bombardments on London and other cities. Um, Winston Churchill has constantly pleaded for United States to assist them. I mean, it is a horrible part of history for Britain. They've asked for 10 ships, 10 old First World War ships that they thought that Americans had. They were not using them, um, and Americans went back and forth and back and forth, and kind of they were not interested in getting involved in the European war, and kind of wanted to stay out of it. And eventually Brits got the ships, but they had to actually give away their territories. near Canada and in Caribbean. They basically donated them, gave them to United States. So it's a reminiscent, a little bit of a mineral deal, but anyway, so that was that. But then Winston Churchill went to the parliament and he made one of his greatest speeches, because he did a lot of them, where one sentence struck me as particularly important, where he explained that that Europe is no longer the same. We don't have our allies, traditional allies such as France or Netherlands or others that that we could count on. And the United States is not coming to our aid. And what might happen is that we might need to fight alone. And he used that as a last sentence in his speech, that if needed, we will fight alone. And when we're thinking now about strategic communication, that is a horrible thing to say. It would get people,
but very powerful.
But it's very powerful. Because it shares responsibility with the people and it tells the truth. Yeah, we did everything that we can. We tried to help allies. We tried to help France because, that was what Brits did. We tried to appeal to Americans. This is what Churchill did. But yeah, we're left on our own, and we need to fight as well as we can with whatever we have. And he wasn't thinking how to calm people down, tell them something, look the other direction. He told it as it is, and mobilize the people. And
the allies as well.
Later, the allies as well, yes. So it tells me, this example tells me that at the moment, at the most difficult moment, what is important is to tell it like it is, to tell the truth.
Right, and such a great message to end on with. Ačiū labai, Minister Landsbergis, for being with us. It was such a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you so much.